The Chargers hosted Tyler Biadasz for a visit on Thursday, which is great news. And we have the guy who broke the news, Daniel Popper, on the show to talk about that and the rest of what's going on in free agency.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons together, but this is our 8th year as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. And we have a big one today because Daniel Popper from The Athletic is going to join the show to talk about Tyler Biadasz and the Chargers showing interest in center, which is a desperate need for them, but also getting into the latest on Zion Johnson, if he'll be back, if there's a chance the Chargers could lose out on Odafe Oweh and Khalil Mack, and also why he thinks this is the year that Joe Hortiz will break his tendencies and actually potentially spend big on a free agent. We're going to get into all of that. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. You use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Here he is, Daniel Popper. All right, guys, well, we have the biggest guest of the offseason so far, and, we've been putting out a lot of shows to that saying something. The most respected man in the Chargers beat right now, Daniel Popper, on the show with us, which is one of the best follows that you can follow on Twitter at Daniel R. Popper. And also make sure you're subscribing to his Substack because Hops with Pop is one of the more informational, entertaining shows that are out there, especially Chargers related right now. Also senior writer, of course, for The Athletic, covering the Chargers. Popper, thank you so much for coming on today, man. We get you on a day that you're breaking news, which is pretty cool.
I appreciate it, guys. I mean, Daniel, you do the best intros, man. Like you always make. I always leave this show feeling really good about myself, just strictly based on your introductions every time I come on.
Hey, man, if there's anyone that's an expert in all of Chargers content that's getting put out there, I see it all. And I know what the quality is of the product that you put out. And I think it's a huge part because of how much you care about it and the time and effort that you put into it, which can't be. I mean, if you haven't checked out Daniel Popper's top 150 free agents, which he just actually updated to.
What are you doing with your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's the beast of the NFL. I mean, we're big Dane Brugler, the Beast fans, and this is the closest thing to that as far as NFL free agency goes. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out. And we'll talk first about Daniel Popper's 75th ranked free agent because he did have a visit with the Chargers on Thursday, according to Daniel Popper, who broke the news himself. So I think we talked a little bit before, but I think it gave a sense of calm to Chargers fans who are just ravenous as far as the Chargers fixing the interior of the offensive line and the center position specifically. But you, like I said, have him ranked as the 75th best free agent. Do you think he could be the answer to fix the Chargers' several-year issue at center?
Yeah, I mean, he's an option. Like, here's how it frames.
Is it a big enough swing? That's I think the other part.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's one question, but like he's definitely a better player than Bradley Bozeman, and like obviously that's a low bar. Bradley struggled last year, and obviously retired earlier this offseason. You're trying to improve on what you had, and Tyler Biadasz is obviously an improvement on that. Now with him, I think my question is like, does he fit Mike McDaniel's scheme? And I think that's going to be sort of the question you have to ask with a lot of these interior offensive linemen. The style of running game is going to be different in this offensive system. It's going to be a lot more outside zone. You're going to need a lot more athleticism and range from the offensive lineman in terms of reach blocks. The screen game is going to be more diverse. So you need guys that can get out and play in space. I don't know if Biadasz is that, but he is a savvy, smart player. He understands leverage. He understands angles. He's capable as a pass protector and as a run blocker. And so, he started a lot of games. He's an improvement over what they had. I think on a broader level, the Chargers are going to be kicking the tires on a lot of interior offensive linemen. Like, this is not a situation like last year where it's like, Trey Pipkins is still on the roster, and I guess he could play right guard, and Bradley Bozeman got re-signed. Like, they could piece this thing together with two really good tackles. Like, no, they don't have anybody right now. Like, they need to find 3 new starters on the interior, potentially. We'll see what happens with Zion Johnson. But like, as of right now, they have 2 starting jobs open. They need a starting center and they need a starting right guard, and they have to go find those players. So they're going to be kicking the tires on a number of interior players. I think that they're going to be looking at the top of the market. I think they're going to be looking in the mid market. And I think they're also going to be looking lower down the market because they have to build out the depth of this roster. They have 5 offensive linemen on the roster right now.
Right. And that's
Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, who are both coming back from season-ending injuries. It is Branson Taylor, Josh Kaltenberger, and Ben Cleveland. Like, they could play a football game, but would they survive the playoff game, right? The football game. So they got to get guys that can start, and they got to get depth pieces as well, and they got to attack this. And that means, looking at a number of different guys. And when a starting center becomes available because of a cut in the case of Tyler Biadasz, you got to take a look at him and see if he's a viable option. I would also add that the comp pick formula is always going to be a factor for Joe Hortiz. And because Tyler Biadasz did not finish his contract, he would not factor into the comp pick formula if the Chargers were to sign him. So that's also, an attractive part of this.
Absolutely. It's a big part of it for sure. We talked a little bit about, the excellent work you did on your top 150 free agents article that you put out. And the Chargers have a ton of spots to fill outside of their own guys that are attempting to re-sign. Everyone wants a Tyler Linderbaum, including us. But he'll have plenty of suitors. He's going to have a lot of guys, a lot of teams are going to be trying to bring him in. But besides him, who is an external free agent on your list that you think makes a ton of sense for the Chargers?
Specifically at center or any position?
No, just any position.
Yeah, so
just any position.
There's a number of guys. I have a list coming out tomorrow, Friday, with my 12 favorite fits for the Chargers. Obviously, start with Linderbaum. He's number 1 on the list, but I think Connor McGovern at center is a really good fit. Luke Fortner at center is a really good fit. Isaac Seumalo at left guard, I think, would be a cheaper option if Zion Johnson does walk. Some skill position guys. Charlie Kohler is one of my favorite players in free agency. Ravens tight end. He is a dominant run blocker, and I think he has a lot of upside as a pass catcher that was sort of untapped in Baltimore because he was playing behind Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. I like Kenneth Gainwell at running back, Pittsburgh Steeler, more of a pass catcher receiving back, but I think he would fit well in a room with Omarion Hampton and Kamani Vidal. And I think that Mike McDaniel could get pretty creative in terms of how he uses Gainwell. Gainwell is very versatile in terms of where he aligns. Defensively, we'll see what happens with Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh if they get both of those guys back. That's obviously a really solid trio with Tuli Tuipulotu, but Joseph Osai from Cincinnati is a guy I really like as a potential speed rusher to add to that room if one of those two or both of them end up leaving in Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh. Monteric Brown from Jacksonville, the Jaguars. He's a corner that I like a lot. I think he was in my like 105 to 110 range. I don't think he would cost a lot of money. I projected him at $6 million a year, but I really love his capability in zone coverage, which is obviously very important if Chris O'Leary is running the same scheme as Jesse Minter. I think he has great instincts both in the short area and in the deep part of the field as a zone defender. And he has some size outside too at 6 foot. So those are some guys that'll be on my list tomorrow. There's more. There's obviously a lot more guys that I think could fit into what the Chargers want to do. But those are just a few of the guys that I think fit very well.
Well, I think that's the impressive thing about the list in particular is just the fact that you are a Chargers beat reporter, but you have to kind of look through it in the national scope of things when you're doing a list like that. But I'm sure while you're going through that and you're watching tape and all these guys, it's hard for you to turn the Chargers part off where you're like, hey, this guy
100%.
Feels like you'd be a really, really good fit for what the Chargers are doing. And I think the biggest thing that we don't know right now and the first kind of dominoes to fall are going to be those internal guys that the Chargers have to make these big decisions on. And as you put in your draft combine intel that you got from there, the price has gone up on some of these guys, and it might be a little bit tougher for them to keep it together, right, with all three of their big guys, including Zion Johnson, Odafe Oweh, and Khalil Mack. But I want to start with Zion Johnson because it's so interesting because you put this development into him, every year you're waiting kind of for that breakout, and this was the closest thing we got to it in 2025, and he was easily the best part of an interior offensive line that was really bad, right? And even at his best, it wasn't as if anyone's thinking he's going to be a top 5 guard at the position or anything, but first round biases, all of those things put together, you have said now that it could be $20 million per season that he ends up making, right? That at the high end,
it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't if he ends up signing for $20 million a year somewhere, it wouldn't surprise me. Now, I don't know if he's going to sign for that, but my understanding is that that's within the realm of possibility, so it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
We have more to get into, including why Popper thinks that there is a chance, but maybe not a big one, that the Chargers could lose Odafe Oweh and Khalil Mack if they let them hit the open market, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. We live in a world where you can stream anything, order food in minutes, and carry supercomputers in our pockets. And somehow, buying tickets to a live game still feels complicated. Hidden fees, jumping prices, endless steps, and there has to be a better way. And the good news is, there is. That's why I use the Game Time app, because it gives the advantage back to the fans and makes getting tickets super simple. Whether it's NFL games, concerts, comedy, whatever you're into, you can find tickets on Game Time. You can see panoramic views from your seat before you buy the tickets. The price you see includes all of the fees, which is awesome. No surprises at checkout. And you can even get zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for extra savings. I was just on the Game Time app because I just like to see what's going on in San Diego and realize that pretty soon they're going to have NCAA tournament games here in San Diego, which you can find tickets for less than $300, which is awesome. But 2 taps and you have great seats locked in. Fast, easy, done. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Well, and so at this point, though, with, free agency about a week away, what is your feeling on it? Do you feel like the Chargers are still pushing hard for it? Do you think there's still a realistic chance that he's back? Or at this point, are you thinking, hey, okay, it's very realistic he could be on another team in 2026?
Yeah, I think it's up in the air. A lot depends on, what their ceiling is. And that's hard to nail down, right? Like, it's hard to know, okay, this is what the Chargers are willing to pay for Zion Johnson. I know what I'm willing to pay, and I know what
you
the
think
market
he's worth. Yeah.
So I would probably get to 17. That's where I would draw the line. $17 million a year. It's a little pricey, but I could probably get there because I look at what he did from week 13 to week 17, and I'm like, okay, this is starting to look like what it should have looked like when he was drafted in the first round. Now, he played in the Patriots game in the playoffs and kind of reverted to some of his old habits, which, was a sour way to end the season for Zion Johnson. But, that, like, based on that, I would probably get to 17. That's what I would do. But I don't know what the Chargers number is. Could be 13, could be 14.
Because they have a number.
They have a number. They have a range. They have a ceiling. It's not like a hard ceiling. This is how Joe Hortiz explained it in his press conference.
Right.
But there's a range, and they have a valuation on the player. And they're not going to go like well above what they deem a proper valuation for the player. So, if it ends up getting into the 17, 18, $19 million, $20 million, like I just don't see the Chargers getting to that price for Zion Johnson. I think they would view it as, okay, we could take that 17 and spend $7 million on a left guard, $7 million on a right guard, and spread the money out in that way, right? And try and find multiple pieces. Because as we mentioned, they have to find potentially 3 new starters. They also have to find a bunch of capable depth pieces, right? And so that's like part of their calculus as well. It's like, okay, you got to find the starters, but you're also going to have to spend some of this cap space on your swing guard, on a backup center, on all of these types of things. And like, okay, last year they signed Andre James for the veteran minimum. Is that what they want to do again in 2026 when it comes to backup center? Do they want to spend a little bit more to get a player that actually might be able to compete at the position? Right. So that's all part of the calculus. But because of like my understanding of Zion's market and my understanding of, how the Chargers want to operate, like if it gets up into that range where you're talking about 17, 18, $19 million, like I have a tough time seeing the Chargers get there. We'll see what it looks like. That's where I think the market is. For me personally, if the Chargers can find a way to get Zion Johnson back, it makes the puzzle pieces fit together way more easily, which is something I've said. You get Zion Johnson back, and okay, there's a player you're comfortable with, a guy that can play in McDaniel's scheme because he's a phenomenal athlete and mover. Yeah. And then you figure out center and right guard, and you piece it together in that way. But $20 million for Zion Johnson is a lot of money. It just is like where he's at in his career, even if you're a person like me who loves what he put on tape from week 13 to 17.
It is. It is a lot of money, and can you justify it with the totality of his play over the course of his career? I think that's going to be a very interesting situation to monitor. But that's not the only guys that the Chargers have to think about potentially bringing back. They have 2 enormous defensive free agents in Odafe Oweh and Khalil Mack, who both remain unsigned at this point. I think most Charger fans believe that LA will be able to at least bring one of them back, but is there a chance that they end up missing out on both of them and they hit the open market?
There's always a chance, right? Like I've learned in this business that you never speak in absolutes, right? Like my sense right now, if I had to predict it, is that Khalil Mack will be back and we'll see on Odafe Oweh. A lot depends on what the market ends up being. I think if Odafe Oweh ends up being a $25 million a year player, which is possible, that's probably a bit too pricey for Odafe Oweh. And then you try and pivot. How do you pivot? There are multiple options. You could try and shop in free agency. Threw out Joseph Osai as a possible option. I had him as like an $11 million a year player. They could bring in like a Leonard Floyd for like a 1 year, $8 million deal. There's some other older veterans like a Cameron Jordan or somebody like that. They could use the 22nd overall pick on an edge rusher. There's a lot of guys that are going to be available in that range. Akeem Mesidor, Keldrick Falk, TJ Parker out of Clemson is probably my favorite of that group of edge rushers in the late teens, 20s. So there are ways to pivot. I think right now, like my sense would be, okay, bring Khalil Mack back on a similar deal to the one he signed last year, and then see what happens with Odafe Oweh's market. If it gets to a place where it's $25+ million a year, then you pivot to any of these other contingency plans, which could be, using the 22nd overall pick, bringing a veteran free agent, maybe a younger free agent, and trying to figure it out that way. Potentially try and shop at the top of the market at edge rusher and, look at Trey Hendrickson or something like that. Like it's all possible because you have, $100 million in cap space. Like you can't rule anything out. So I'm not going to speak in absolutes here. I could speak in sort of what my sense is of the situation. Yeah. It's possible that they both hit the open market. It's possible that they're both back. It's possible that one of them is back and one of them's not. I think anything's sort of on the table right now, but that's sort of my read on the situation.
Well, I think there is some scar tissue because of the Poona Ford, where you're like, hey, he played so well, they have to bring him back, right? Like they know how important he is. They're going to make him a priority. And then as soon as he hit the open up market, he was gone and he ran across the street, right? So I think there is some of that built into it. That's a different
situation, though. I mean, like Poona didn't sign for $20 million a year.
True.
Poona signed for $9 million a year, which I thought was like a really fair deal for both sides. They could have done that deal. They didn't do that deal. They learned their lesson because they signed Tyler Tart to a market rate contract in January. They signed him for $30 million, right? Like they paid the guy that played well. I thought that was a fair deal for Tyler Tart too. I think like if Poona Ford's market went crazy, I could understand them not doing that deal, but they could have done the deal for $9.5 million a year. They didn't. I thought that would have been a very fair deal. With Odafe Oweh, like the market could get to a place where you're just paying too much for a guy that was good, but not great. And that's where you get into very risky situations as a team. When you pay good players like they are great players, and you get good player production, but you're paying him like a great player. That delta is a loss for an organization, right? And I think that's where you can run into a little bit of risk. And that's why I feel like the Oweh situation is a little different than the Poona situation.
Agreed. And I think, something I've heard you say on Hops with Pop is that for Joe Hortiz, though, when you're talking about that surplus value and being able to get surplus value out of these contracts and how hard that is once you start paying at the top of the market for these guys, you have to be able to identify the guys that you can pay at the top of the market and still feel like you're getting adequate value because you've done a great job bargain shopping. And there's so many guys you can look at that have so far outplayed what you signed them for, which is great. But the problem is even while doing that, you've left some fatal flaws on this roster, right? And part of that is because of the lack of aggressiveness that they've had in free agency. And like Tyler Tart, and I laughed when he said it because it was like such an overcorrection. It's like, hey, we're not even going to let this dude get out of January unsigned. We're not having another Poona Ford. We're just going to take care of it now. Right. But then you start that process, and now we've all had a month where you're not re-signing any of these other really important guys, right? And it kind of sits with you. But as far as like the external guys goes and just Joe Hortiz's philosophies, like he's had so many great players that have played at such a high level and some of his misses, but his misses were such low value contracts that you don't think about it. There's no JC
like Tyler
Jacksons.
Conklin, right? Yeah.
Right. There's no JC Jacksons, and it's like why they have one of the healthiest dead cap situations in the league. Like it was a ridiculously low number before the cuts that they just had right now. Yeah, but at the same time,
1.6 million, I think, before,
which is insane, dude. Especially coming from some of those Tom Telesco years where you just had some ridiculous numbers sitting there.
The Bulaga dead money, yeah.
Chris Harris Jr. dead money,
sorry,
J.C.
guys.
Jackson
You said that
dead
name.
money. Like,
I'm sorry.
yeah, and good intention. But do you think that this is a year where he could break it, right? That he could break the philosophy, that he could actually spend at the top of the market? Because I know Chargers fans are going to have all these names. You brought up Trey Henderson. There's other, big name guys out there. But you have to wonder if Joe Hortiz is actually willing to spend the money, Tyler Linderbaum being obviously one of the main ones. Do you think this is the year we could actually see him shop at the top of the market?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think so. I think for the right player, I think they would, right? And I think like when you have $100 million in cap space, you can be very creative and aggressive in different ways too, right? Like you can spend in free agency. You can also be very aggressive on the trade market in terms of taking on salary from players that are available in, via that avenue. So,
right.
At the end of the day, like they got to add talent to this roster. And you went out and you brought in Jim Harbaugh with the expectation that you're going to win. I understand there were injuries last year, but it's time to win. Yeah. Like it's time to win. You have to win a playoff game, like at least, right? And so I believe the urgency of the situation will force Joe Hortiz to shift a little bit away from how he's operated in free agency, how he's operated in off seasons, and be a little bit more aggressive. That could be aggressive in spending on new contracts for free agents. It could be aggressive in terms of the trade market. But I think that they're in a place in the build where they have to be more aggressive. I do believe that at this stage.
We still have more coming up here with Daniel Popper, including if he's putting any stock in any of the rumors the Chargers could go big game hunting at wide receiver, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get a real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. It's great to hear.
Yeah, it felt like in years past, the coordinators had a lot to say in who the Chargers picked up in free agency, and they had much more success with the defensive guys than that they brought in than the offensive guys. But in his press conference, Joe Hortiz praised Mike McDaniel as an evaluator of talent. Do you think he will be heavily involved this year in this year's free agency class?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he has a vision for how he wants to play offensively. This is going to be his system. They're going to run the Mike McDaniel scheme. Jim Harbaugh will obviously be involved, but they brought him in to use their words to be the head coach of the offense. So if you're the head coach of the offense, you're going to have a clear vision of how you want to play. And as a result, you're going to have a clear vision of who you need to acquire to play the way you want to play. So yes, he'll be heavily involved in identifying the type of offensive lineman that he wants to be able to run his scheme and do some of the things that we were talking about in the run game earlier. He'll be involved in what type of pass catchers, tight ends. Tight end is a really interesting position because a lot of these guys they were playing with in the Greg Roman system are not going to fit in the Mike McDaniel system, right?
Will
like
Disley
they already moved
released.
on. Yeah. They already moved on from Will Disley, but like a Tucker Fisk, I don't know how he really finds a role within this offense. A Scott Matlock, how does he find a role within this offense when you really need that athleticism, those movement skills, right? So the scheme itself is going to force changes in personnel, and Mike McDaniel will be involved in that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of just what it felt like from the outside looking in, where it's like it did feel like they were, Bradley Bozeman and Hayden Hurst. And these guys, even, Mekhi Becton, obviously a fit, but, theoretically with what they wanted to do under Greg Roman, but not nearly, as good of a fit with what Mike McDaniel is probably going to bring to the table. But it did feel like, like the Dante Jackson signing, the Christian Fulton signings, all of those don't happen, right, without Jesse Minter's kind of involvement to some degree in it. And obviously those have worked out really well for them. And the evaluation from potentially their offensive coordinator on that side of the ball hasn't worked out nearly as well, whether, as Bozeman
and the
or
development
any of those guys.
Like the development of the players is also important, right? Like I think you can say, like Jesse Minter was involved in identifying some of these defensive players, but the position coaches are damn good coaches, right? And like you talk about what Mike Elston has been able to get out of some of these defensive linemen they brought in.
Unbelievable.
For Deshaun Hand, T.R. Tart, right? Like you got to give him credit. Christian Fulton plays well in the scheme. Dante Jackson plays well in the scheme. got to give it a hat tip to
the
Steve
secondary
Klingscale.
almost in general, right?
Right.
How much do you think that helps them? That like you were, I mean, obviously Mike Elston must not have wanted the defensive coordinator job, right? Because it doesn't make any sense for him not to at least get a crack at that interview, like we saw other guys, Dylan Roney and Steve Klingscale, Adam Fuller, to name a couple of them. But how big of a deal do you think that is they were able to keep most of that defensive coaching staff together with Chris O'Leary taking over? Because I thought that was huge, especially after some of those guys didn't get the job.
Enormous.
Yeah.
Enormous. Like those guys are all really, really good coaches. Like that's one of my favorite parts of the job is when I'm working on stories on individual players, trend pieces, and I get a chance to sit down with some of these assistants. Just really impressive guys across the board. Offensively too. Like I really thought Andy Bischoff was a very impressive coach. Obviously he was let go when Mike McDaniel came in, but it was Sanjay Lal, another coach that I've really enjoyed talking to. But like that was my first introduction to Chris O'Leary, right? It was like,
it's a great story too. You had on him.
They trade for Elijah Molden, 2024. He has a pick in his second game. I'm writing a story about sort of how they onboarded him. And I had a 15-minute conversation with Chris O'Leary on the practice fields in Charlotte when they were staying there for the week ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers game. And that was my first moment where I was like, okay, this guy might have a little something, right? He ends up leaving, going to Western Michigan, kind of was off my radar as a result, heading into the defensive coordinator search. But all of these guys, that I've had a chance to talk to, Steve Klingscale, Mike Elston, Navarro Bowman was another guy that was, awesome to talk to, right? Obviously he's, a legend from his playing career. But keeping that staff together, I think was a priority for the organization. I think in bringing a guy in, Chris O'Leary, who was beloved in the building in 2024 as the safeties coach before he left, I think that was important in terms of, keeping that group together, feeling, those guys feeling like, okay, like this is not going to change too much from what was happening under Jesse. And it's hard to overstate how important that was, I think.
Yep, and the Chargers have one of the youngest, cheapest wide receiver rooms in the NFL, and over the last several days, they've been linked to some of the biggest names out there, with Mike Evans, Alec Pierce, and even A.J. Brown. Now, that doesn't seem, it doesn't mean that they won't sign them, but do you think there's smoke in telling that the Chargers think that they need a more proven receiver on the outside?
Yeah, I don't think it's, just willy-nilly. Like, I don't think it's like a situation where you're looking at it and saying, oh, this isn't anything, right? Like, obviously they brought in an offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel, who, as we talked about earlier, is going to have a vision. They feel like they're going to need a certain level of talent. He's coming in and taking a look at a group of receivers that he hasn't worked with before. I think in terms of the free agents, like Alec Pierce, for example, is a guy you brought up. If he ends up making $25.5 million a year, like, is that a good deal? I like the player. Like, I think Alec Pierce is a very viable NFL receiver. He can push the field vertically. He's great in 50-50 situations. I think he's improved.
20 plus yards per catch is crazy.
Right. He's improved as an intermediate route runner. I think he's got upside. I think he can continue to grow as a receiver, but is he like a true number one guy that you're going to pay $26 million a year? And are the Chargers in a position to give that kind of contract out to Alec Pierce when they have all of these other holes? So, I think there could be something there in terms of the Chargers trying to add more talent offensively, particularly at receiver, and trying to give Mike McDaniel as much talent to work with. At the same time, is that the right way to allocate your resources when there's all of these other holes that you have to address? For me, interior offensive line and then figuring out the edge room, those have to be the priorities. And then if you figure those situations out and you have an opportunity to add talent at receiver, sure. But to me, making a big move at receiver without getting those other two things figured out would be a little bit misguided.
Yeah. And to, some of the points we've touched on throughout this interview where it's just like, you can handle this a lot of different ways. If you go and spend $25 million on a wide receiver and don't, put enough into the interior of the offensive line specifically, there's going to be a riot and, burnt buildings and everything else. Cause it's just okay, well, where's that been as far as the urgency to help Justin Herbert not get hit 129 times?
Right. Which is crazy because that just shows you how hurt this fan base is. Any other fan base would be like, yes, Alec Pierce, AJ Brown. But Chargers fans are like, no.
Yeah. Well,
this team needs a guard. I don't want the high profile receiver. Get a guard. in the building.
I blame
now.
you.
Protect my
I blame
quarterback,
you.
please.
No, I blame Daniel Popper specifically because he's turned us on to capologists, and we know that, effective cap space isn't cap space, or, cap space isn't effective cap space. I'm like, wait a second, the musical chairs have to end somewhere.
I'll take some
You've made us all
responsibility.
smarter, and that's your fault because, now we know. No, I'm just kidding. But, like,
you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong. I will say
I don't think I
know
am
you're
too.
kidding, but I don't think you're wrong. Like,
No, I don't
the amount
think-
of time that I've spent talking about the interior of the offensive line has definitely influenced the temperature of the fan base.
No, of course. I mean, you have the infamous question to, Joe Hortiz, and obviously it has to be something that's addressed. I just thought it was weird. It's like you hear Mike Evans come out from Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports and AJ Brown from Mike Florio, and it's just like, obviously it doesn't mean the Chargers are super interested, but it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some smoke there, right? Or at least them kind of pointing to potentially needing somebody or needing a more proven option outside of the numbers, which, like, I think that Ladd McConkey can be great and can be, Amon St. Brown-esque in this offense with Mike McDaniel if he's used correctly, right? At least as far as the potential to be a number one wide receiver. Yeah. But it would be crazy to go out of all the philosophy we know of Joe Hortiz to go blow, $25 million a season on Alec Pierce.
Right. It comes down to what the deal is, right? It comes down to what you're giving up, right? Like,
of course.
If AJ Brown's available and you can get him for not like a king's ransom in terms of draft capital, like, you have to kick the tires on that. You have to at least check in on it, right? Like Mike Evans, I liked Mike Evans' tape a lot when I watched him. Obviously he was hurt, battled hamstring and collarbone, but when he was back in week 15 and played, like, he looked like a stud. Like, he looked like his normal self. And, you envision him in this offense with Justin Herbert and, the ability to push the ball downfield and throw some of these 50-50 balls and give Mike Evans a shot in certain situations. Like, you can see it fitting together. I'm not saying it's like it's wrong to go try and bolster your receiving group. Like, I think that's absolutely a viable approach. But
it just can't be at the expense. Yeah,
exactly. To do that at the expense of the interior of the offensive line specifically, I think would be a mistake because, I'll be doing these shows at 85 years old being like, maybe you should sign an interior offensive lineman. That's not Mekhi Becton. Like, I'm serious. Like, I feel like I'm crazy because I'm having the same conversations this offseason as I was last offseason. At a certain point, something has to give, right? Like, figure it out. Get some capable NFL offensive linemen on the field and protect this quarterback because he was hit 140 times last year. And at a certain point, like, you're Justin Herbert, you're looking at it, you're like, you get hit another 150 times in a season. You're like, what am I doing here? I was a 4.0 biology major at Oregon. Like, what am I doing with it? You know what I'm saying? So
100%. Yeah. I mean, there has to be, a fear of, an Andrew Luck type of situation. And I don't know if it's there yet. And, every person's different. But when you when you have Madison Beer and a 4.0 biology major, you might just think that there's other
Life's
things
pretty
besides
good.
Getting hit in the head 150 times.
By the way,
a
he's
season.
made a good amount of money. It's not like he's been playing on $1 million a year contracts.
Oh, wait, $250 million by the time his contract is done. Yeah, I think that.
Not even counting his endorsements. Yeah.
No. But anyway, I mean, Popper, you always bring it.
Listen, I would love Mike Evans in this offense. No doubt about it. But, priorities.
Yes.
1.1 yards per catch after the catch, though, is pretty hilarious, which is what he was last year. 1.1 yards after the catch per catch last season for Mike Evans. Yeah. I thought that was one of the funnier stats I've seen. Obviously, that's not why you're bringing him, right? Like, I think a theory for a different show, and we'll wrap it up here, but I think Justin Herbert likes throwing it to big receivers, just generally speaking. I think he trusts it more. But I do think, and one thing I've said, I think if he trusts the offense more this year, you will see him not necessarily, if they do bring Keenan Allen back, totally laser focus on him on big downs and things like that. If he trusts actually, the offense will do some of the work for him. But Daniel Popper, the best in the business, the best Chargers content out there in the written form, and now with Hops with Pop and breaking intel at the Combine, breaking Tyler Biadasz visits. It's only going up. The trajectory has never been higher. But hey, first of all, thank you just for all of the work that you do for us Chargers fans, because I think part of the reason Chargers fans are so upset is because they're so informed, and they're so informed because we have people like Daniel Popper on the beat. So again, check out Hops with Pop on Substack. You can subscribe there. Make sure you're subscribing to The Athletic to get the best offseason written content that is around, maybe for any team, but absolutely for the Chargers. And also just thank you so much, Popper, for giving us some time today and helping our fans out a little bit.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Another special thank you to Daniel Popper. Every time he comes on, he crushes it. The only bad thing is that we can't get him on more because he's awesome, and obviously we're putting out 2 shows a day, but we couldn't do it without the everydayers. And to make sure you never miss big-time interviews like today's, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want an early, notice on it, you can do that in the Locked On Chargers Discord, which is part of the Locked On Everydayer Club that you can now be a part of for $5 a month. But free agency is here, and so are we, so you can get 1 month for free of the Everydayer Club with code FREEAGENCY, no spaces, all caps, now through March 15th. Go ad-free and keep this conversation going on the Discord, and you can join the club at lockedonchargers.supercast.com, and you also get an ad-free version of the audio podcast every single day. But to make sure you never miss the show, as always, go subscribe or follow, or go find the show on our social media at Locked On OAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. And be back later on today for the bonus episode where we talk about some contingency plans at edge rusher, including a big one, Trey Hendrickson. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.